Caroline Dowd-Higgins. Thanks for listening to Your Working Life, my podcast series featuring thought leaders in the career and personal growth arena. You spend a significant portion of your life at work, so my goal is to provide you with tools, inspiration, and resources so you can enjoy your career and love your life. And I am delighted to welcome my very special guest to the show today, Jenny Blake. Jenny, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Caroline.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk about you and your amazing book, but let me tell our global listening audience all about you. Jenny Blake is an author, career and business strategist, and international speaker who helps people organize their brain, move beyond burnout, and build sustainable, dynamic careers they love. Jenny authored Pivot, The Only Move That Matters Is Your Next One, and Life After College, which is based on her blog of the same name. With 2 years as a technology startup as the first employee, 5 years at Google on the training and career and development teams, and over 5 years of running her own business, Jenny combines her love of technology with her superpower of simplifying complexity to help clients through big transitions, often to pivot their career or business. So Jenny, I love the title of your book, Pivot. The only move that matters is your next one. What inspired you to write Pivot?
I felt like I was going through a quarter life crisis every few years since I was still early in my career. And as I talked to other people, they were often using similar language.
Yeah.
I think I'm having a midlife crisis. I think I'm having a quarter life crisis. And up till now in our society, we've granted ourselves two of these.
Yeah.
One in your midlife, and in 2007, we coined the term quarter life. And I realized that it's actually happening every few years. At least it was for me. And I remember getting so low, just feeling like there must really be something wrong with me. I'm destined never to be happy in my career. Or this crisis state is accelerating with the rapid change in our economy, and maybe it doesn't have to be a crisis. And only when I almost had to fold my business 2.5 years after leaving Google did I find within me this determination to say there has to be a better way to answer the question, what's next, than what I've currently been doing, which is fumbling around
Well, I
in the
love
dark.
that. Yeah, because you're giving everybody permission to say, look, it's okay to change, and I've heard from behavioral psychologists this concept that we are dramatically different in our human bodies every 5 to 7 years. So why shouldn't we be pivoting and adjusting what we're doing in our professional lives as well?
Exactly. And so often we get pivoted. The company
Yeah.
reorgs, we fold a business, we start a business, we have a side hustle. I mean, there's so much going on now that even 5 to 7 years would be a very long time to be in the same exact type of role. And not all pivots have to be huge, dramatic ones, but it's a way to, and I also want to say that in the startup world, pivoting is plan B, that the business
Yeah.
has failed at the original strategy and now it has to pivot. But what I've found in our careers is that not only is pivot the new normal, but they're often a product of our success. That
Hmm.
when we grow in a certain direction and we hit a plateau, it's because we have kind of mastered that level that we're at. And now we can look toward what's next without having anything be wrong with us.
I think it's also a highly sought after competency, your ability to pivot and fail forward and recover or just adjust and be adaptive, because this career world is very different than it was even 5, 7 years ago.
Absolutely. I remember at Google, one of the things that the hiring criteria was adaptable. How
Yeah.
adaptable is this person? And it is because, especially at a company like Google, the only thing we could count on was change. I
Yeah.
was there from 6,000 employees as it grew to 36,000. And
Wow.
let me say, we were reorging more often than we were orging.
I
It was
bet. I
always a
bet.
reorg. There was always a role change. And so anyone who was trying to grip to some sense of certainty, or even who wanted to know what's the path to promotion, no one could ever give that because there was no set concrete path that would stay the same.
Yeah, I think this linear path is a thing of the past. It's going to be circuitous, and we should celebrate that. But Jenny, I'd love for you to walk me through a little bit of your background and how you have pivoted in your career so the audience can understand what a career pivot is and how you define
Sure.
that.
I define a career pivot as a methodical shift in a new related direction based on what's already working. So, for example, I was a research assistant for a political science professor in college. At the start of my junior year, she started a consulting firm with a Stanford professor doing online political polling. So I pivoted. I took a leave of absence from school and went to help that startup. I was doing marketing, webmaster, and office manager at the
Wow.
startup, and one of my roles was managing our Google AdWords accounts. So after 2 years at the startup, I pivoted and applied to Google to work on the AdWords product training team. So because I'd been a client, I now wanted to get some in front of the room experience. I knew I wanted to be an author and speaker someday, and I had completed my degree. And then within Google, I pivoted from AdWords training once I kind of got bored talking about the technical aspects of the product to career development training. And I loved the people element. I loved helping people think about what was most important to them. And even when I left Google, which what looked from the outside like a very drastic move to walk away from all that, and I really had a dream job, certainly on paper and even in salary.
Hmm.
And but I pivoted from doing coaching and career development inside the company to still doing coaching and career development now on my own. And that's been the biggest anchor in my income, my bridge income, as I call it, for these last 5.5 years.
Well, it sounds like the energy in your voice is palpable, and these pivots have also brought you meaning and satisfaction and dare I say joy, right? Because they're positive pivots.
Yeah, and let's not forget that before each one, I felt deep confusion and
Yeah.
even despair and agony. And so because looking back, and Steve Jobs said this in his Stanford commencement speech, it's so much easier to connect the dots looking backward.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to get better at was connecting just one dot looking forward. I don't think,
Mm.
and I think everyone listening knows we're not in a linear career path anymore, but we don't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
So there's this heightened anxiety, and everyone listening, you can all look back on your own career and see how you have pivoted as well. That I'm not actually telling you something new, I'm just giving language for what you've already done. And that alone has given me and a lot of other people reassurance like, oh, I see now. I see how I leveraged something that was already present in my life, something that was already working, and use that like the pole vaulter uses a pole
Yeah.
to get over that high bar of the next direction rather than the despair that comes from feeling like you have to start from scratch or make some move that sends you into a complete panic.
Well, I like to say that suffering is optional in a career. We can either choose to suffer in silence or we can make that pivot. So, again, thank you for giving us permission to say you don't have to suffer. But what I love that you just said is everybody gets overwhelmed by connecting the dots. How about the dot, singular? Take one baby
Yes.
step, right? And that's how pivot starts.
Yeah, that's why the subtitle is a little tongue in cheek. The only move that matters is your next one, meaning
Yeah.
it's okay not to have a 5 year plan because once you make this one next move, you'll get new information. I say in the book, decisions are data. So sometimes there is no right or wrong answer. Now I'm in a pivot as well, in a post book launch pivot. Like this thing I worked on that was kind of my identity for 3 years is complete. What
Yeah.
now?
Now what?
And I realized that just saying I don't know is very freeing.
Yeah.
That I have experiments that I'm running, just like I talk about in the book. I have all these, I use the metaphor of like racehorses at the starting gate of the Kentucky Derby. We don't always know which of our career pilots are going to take off, but there they are. And just to be able to say, I don't know the next five dots, that's freedom.
Oh, that's great stuff. Okay, so Jenny, let's dive a little deeper because you really illustrate so many beautiful topics that are so resonant to millions of people. And I want to talk first about how you believe that pivoting isn't plan B. Tell me more about that.
Well, back to the startup example, we hear about pivoting when the original direction fails. And I think that up till now in my career, the reason I use the word pivot and kind of hijacked it from the tech world is it's gender neutral and it's judgment neutral. That is the only language we have for when we have that existential crisis
Mm-hmm.
of who am I? What do I want? What's most important to me? Up till now, the only language we've called it is a crisis, a midlife. And I don't want to diminish the deep the depth of when we truly are in crisis. So this is not to diminish those times in our lives, but it is just to say that um, it's okay to be in that state of feeling totally dissolved and not sure what's
Yeah.
next, and that and that is a graduation of sorts, that is a completion, and this is a natural part of the cycle. So pivot is plan A, because to pivot, to embrace change, to embrace the unknown, to embrace the fact that we can't hold on to the old familiar structures of the past, if that becomes plan A, everything's okay. Everything's welcome, whether we're in a building phase or a dissolving phase.
What I'm hearing is this beautiful common denominator of self acceptance, too, to say it's okay to be in transition, to be in flux, right? And enjoy that place.
Yes. And the latest phrase that's been coming to me is self-trust, which
Ah,
is there's a lot thrown around self-acceptance, self-compassion. For me, when I think about career pivots, self-trust means I trust myself to work through even the craziest career nuts, that
mm,
I trust myself to be resourceful, to be curious, to put one foot in front of the other. And I do trust that. And I think anyone listening, unless someone's like 15 years old, which would be awesome if you had listeners at that age. Even they have probably had side projects and
sure.
little hobby jobs. But everyone else, look how you've done this in the past. Look how you can trust yourself to figure things out, even when it seems hopeless. And actually, all the cliches are true that it's darkest before the dawn, but that if you have self-trust in your own resourcefulness, you can know that even if the answer today is I don't know, you can trust that you are working your way toward it, and that's part of the fun. And we got to remember that the complexity of career is part of what keeps us engaged, that if we knew all the answers and the next 50 years we would be bored.
Brilliant, brilliant. So, what about the grass is always greener? So many individuals are constantly yearning for something better. Can you speak to that?
Well, this is a pivot paradox, which is that sometimes the grass is greener
Mm.
on the other side. For me, self-employment is greener grass, straight up. I'm a happier person. Even when my bank account is at zero, I'm still happier. So I know it's the right plot of grass. I just have to improve my grass growing abilities now on this plot of land. Even though I loved my time at Google, there came a point where it was no longer the right patch of grass for me. Now, the paradox is that, I don't encourage job hopping or leaving something the second it gets hard. I think so much growth in life comes from sticking with something and learning, pushing through those plateaus. And so there's always an opportunity to ask, well, how can I love what's already right in front of me? How can I get the most out of where I am right now in my career, in this exact role or this exact phase of my business? And be mindful that you can test patches of the other grass that you're looking at and say, is that for me or not? So even though a side hustle will not give someone the experience of self-employment full time, it can start to give some experiential data of, well, is that patch of grass actually better for me or not?
And I love that concept of test patching because so many people, jump without the net. And I'm all about taking risks, but you can make educated decisions based on test driving, right, and experimenting. So again, love how your book gives us very particular action steps and tools and exercises to make those decisions. Now, I love this concept. How do we become discoverable, especially if your pivot is rather extreme?
This is like Bluetooth technology. So, in order for two of our Bluetooth devices to pair to each other, like our phone in the car or my phone and Alexa, they both have to be in discoverable mode. And the same is true for career and business. That in order for so the most agile pivoters are discoverable, which means that clients and companies are often approaching them. They're the one that has a wait list because they're so discoverable that opportunities come to them and not the other way around. And so the biggest ways to do this, there are three: results, reputation, and platform. Are you good at what you do? And if not, keep practicing,
Yeah,
getting
keep
better at it,
get
get
better.
results,
Right.
not just so just having the skill is not enough. You have to show how that skill translates to results for your company or for other people. Then reputation is you start to develop a reputation as an expert in this area. And then platform is you proactively putting your thoughts out there. That doesn't mean that everybody needs to be an author or a podcaster, but how can you contribute to your industry in a way that makes you even more discoverable? So beyond having a strong reputation, how you now give back, how do you serve in this area so I'll give an example. My friend Julie wrote a book while working as in learning and development at a hedge fund. And she never planned for the book to be her exit strategy in a way, the way my first book was from Google. She didn't want that. Julie and I joke she would be miserable doing what I do, one-on-one coaching, and I would be miserable working within a large organization. But someone from Chanel found her profile on LinkedIn and they read her book and poached her. She's now the
Wow.
global head of people development for Chanel, a job that is beyond her every wildest dream. She would have never thought to even apply for it. But because she was discoverable and they could read her whole philosophy in her book, she got the job.
That's
And
amazing.
that's a great example of how you don't have to be self employed or be a personal brand in order to do things that put you out there.
But you've got to be discoverable and you've got to be
Yes.
seen and heard. Love that. So, Jenny, you spoke earlier that sometimes our pivot is a choice, but sometimes it's also a necessity, perhaps when there's a merger or an acquisition and people are downsized. So, how do you get your mojo back when you hit a proverbial wall or you hit a rut?
One is just accepting. I mean, there is a phase of shock that will come from getting pivoted. And for a lot of people I talk to, of course, you feel shock, you feel maybe embarrassed, you feel like, is there anything I could have done differently? It's not dissimilar to a breakup. Like, what could I have done? Well, why did this happen? Why me? Why now? And actually, we can turn those questions around and say, yes, if you're the main character in a movie, why is this happening to you right now in this exact way? What are you meant to learn and do differently? And again, I don't want to diminish how shocking or traumatic it can be to lose your job, especially if you're a primary breadwinner. But I will just say, in the pivot conversations I have had, not one person not regrets because they didn't choose it, but would have chosen differently of getting
Right.
pivoted. They all said it was actually what I needed. I actually didn't have the courage to make that decision on my own. And even though this was shocking, it forced me into this new direction and I'm so much happier. So nobody that I spoke to said, oh, yeah, that's still the worst thing that ever happened. It's like it was a catalyst. And so, but that feeling, that clarity and acceptance may not come overnight. So be patient with it.
So, in your experience now coaching clients through their pivot, what's the biggest mistake that people make?
One of the biggest mistakes is skipping over your existing strengths and resources
Mm,
and what success looks like. A lot of go-getters and very skilled problem solvers. I work with many mid-career and senior career professionals, like senior meaning senior levels of leadership within
yeah.
their organizations. And the tendency is because you're so effective at problem solving, the second you say, oh, I'm at a pivot point, what's out there? So immediately you've skipped over your own strengths and your own vision of what success looks like. And you're by going straight to what's out there and trying to solve the pivot without first grounding down in who you already are and what's already working and what you know that success looks like, then you're scanning without a plan. It feels like aimless. And then the other mistake, big mistake, is trying to make a career move overnight. That actually small experiments, say about 10% of your time or current career portfolio, that helps test the waters of a new direction and takes the pressure off of having to have it all figured out in one go.
Love it. Jenny Blake, you are extraordinary. Your book is Pivot. The only move that matters is your next one. So tell us how we can buy the book and how we can follow you online because you are more than discoverable, my dear. You are out
Oh,
there and making great things happen, for which I am very grateful.
well, thank you so much. I'm grateful to have been here on the show and to all of you here listening. You can buy the book anywhere books are sold. I also have a website with a full toolkit, tons of free exercises at pivotmethod.com. And if you go to slash toolkit, you'll see all these free templates. One of my favorites is the ideal day Mad Lib. And then I also have an awesome team of pivot coaches. If anybody wants a 2-session jumpstart just to help you get going. And I do a private community called Momentum where it's as much my peer mastermind group among my favorite pivoters as well. And I do biweekly calls and we have a great community of support there for side hustlers and solopreneurs and creatives looking to just make things happen.
Oh, I love it. Jenny Blake, what a joy to have you on the show. I wish you continued success. Thank you for all that you're doing for career professionals, helping them pivot. And I hope our paths cross again sometime soon in person.
Likewise, me too. Thank you again, Caroline. It's really a joy and an honor to be here.
Thank you. And I want to thank all of our global listeners for tuning into Your Working Life, where my goal is to help you design your career destiny so it doesn't happen by default. Career and life satisfaction is possible, and it's time to embrace what you really love doing so you can do more of it. My show is now available on iTunes, YouTube, Podbean, and Stitcher. I hope you will subscribe so you get fresh Your Working Life podcasts every week. And leave a comment because I always appreciate hearing from my listeners. I'm Caroline Dowd-Higgins. Take good care.